Hey everybody, welcome to the video. NASCAR has finished up its West Coast swing last weekend with the race at Phoenix. Now we're heading out east to Georgia for the Folds of Honor QuikTrip 500 at the newly reconfigured Atlanta Motor Speedway. And I tell you what, I am super excited for the race this weekend because if you're looking at old Atlanta information data or just looking at the old track, you can completely toss it out the window as it is no longer relevant because they have completely redone this track. I know we all know Atlanta as the old, rough, abrasive racing surface where Larry Mack would get out the cheese grater and grind down the tires on the TV, showing you guys just an example of how much it ate up tires, but that's no longer going to be the case. It's completely repaved, so it's supposed to race like it's 3 to 4 years old. They made it narrower. They increased the banking from 24 to 28 degrees. They imposed a double yellow line rule, and we're running the super speedway package compared to the 670 horsepower package they ran the previous 3 weeks at Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Auto Club. And my assumption heading into the season was that this is going to be some pack racing on a 1.5 mile track. Busch did mention when they did testing here, they were running about a second faster when they were in a group. And if you guys watch practice, it certainly reaffirmed my assumptions that I had heading into this race weekend, as they were too wide pack racing in practice. The top 30 drivers were within 0.4 of a second each other in their top speeds, so it looks like we're going to see a bit of a mini Daytona out here. And I don't mean that's going to be a full-on carnage fest. It very well might be, but I think we're going to be somewhere in the middle between an intermediate mile-and-a-half track and a Daytona, so take that for what you will. But it should be some pretty awesome racing this weekend. I am certainly looking forward to breaking this down, no matter how confusing it might end up being. And if you are new here, my name is Pennell. I break down the NASCAR DFS slate each and every single weekend on this YouTube channel. Let's go live on Sunday mornings answering all the questions you may have. And I'm part of the Awesemo YouTube channel and website. I write articles over on the site, and I do the live before lock show with Jason or Phil, an hour leading up until lock each and every single Sunday. And if you do end up enjoying today's free content, all I ask in return is if you can leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already, make sure you hit the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new content and go live on Sundays. And leave a comment down below agreeing or disagreeing with anything I have to say, or if you just want to say hi or tell me I suck, you can certainly do that as well, but any little bit helps. Now, if we could get over 350 likes on this video, I've said it each time this season, and we've gone way past that each and every single time, so if we could keep doing that, that would be absolutely awesome, and I truly do appreciate it. And if you want to take it one step further and join the best NASCAR DFS community out there, also cover other sports as well, outside of NASCAR, including the MLB, which is coming up very, very soon. Got a monster MLB model for that. But Discord's jumping 24/7, got projections, ownership projections, which are the best in the industry. I run simulations for DraftKings, FanDuel. You get my entire NASCAR model, which goes way further than just the driver-by-driver breakdown portion you see in today's video. And I have my own optimizer, which can build 150 lineups, give all the settings, groups, whatever you want, and you can upload it right to DraftKings. So lots of extra content over there if you want to join. Link is down below. Find the orange bubble. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by PrizePicks. You can use code CPEN to get a free instant deposit match bonus up to $100. There's no catch. It's literally free money if you are a new signee over there. Head over to PrizePicks.com. Use the link down below. But with that being said, let's get right into the preview of this week's race. And really quick, the live stream this weekend, same as usual, on Sunday morning around 11 a.m. Eastern. If you want to come in, hang out, ask me all the questions you want, or just chill before the race, I'll be more than happy to have you. And if you want to join the DraftKings contest that I host each and every single week, look at the pinned comment down below in this video, or you can hit me up on Twitter, or just leave your DK username down below in the comments, and I'll be able to get you into the contest. But as previously mentioned, this is the Folds of Honor QuikTrip 500. I believe it's our last year sponsor in this race. We're at Atlanta Motor Speedway, but not the old Atlanta. We are now at New Atlanta, which is basically a mini super speedway, hybrid mix intermediate track. There's your out on the track. It's a mile and a half / super speedway, which is what I'm going to call it for the type. Now, we've never been here before. We haven't had an actual race, so again, a bit of speculation there, but what we've seen in practice, I think definitely reaffirmed those assumptions. This is a mile and a half track. We have 325 laps, meaning there's a lot of dominator points up for grabs, but the weird thing is I don't think we can project around half of these dominator points because fast laps are probably going to be sporadic and random as they are at most super speedways, because if we're running the super speedway package, we're going to be drafting off of each other. There's no way in telling who's going to be picking up fast laps, because if you guys watch practice, the top speed kept interchanging. All these guys were 0.4 of a second away from each other. So I think trying to project fast laps would be a bit of a mistake. Now, usually with super speedways, we're talking like 160 to 200 laps. So having 325 laps definitely changes the game a little bit. Now, I'll definitely put more consideration in rostering guys closer to the front than I would in a normal Daytona race. So it's a bit of a hybrid here. Don't completely go in with the strategy of this is a full-on Daytona race. I am stacking the back with guys like Greg Biffle, Cody Ware, Josh Bilicki. It's going to be a bit of a hybrid. So again, Ryan Blaney starting second. I'd definitely be more inclined to play him on this slate than I would the Daytona 500 if he was in the same spot. So basically what I'm saying is try to hedge your bets a little bit, play some lineups where it could be a hybrid mix, and play some lineups where you're going on full on stack the back. But I will say I would not be as heavy on these scrubs as I would be at a Daytona race. I would definitely be more inclined to playing some drivers starting closer to the front and hoping that they could lead 60 to 80 laps if they happen to go choo-choo train for a while. And if you want my overall thoughts on the pricing this weekend, it does not matter. I always say that a plate race, build whatever lineup you want. You can leave as much money on the table as you want. Although, again, I'm probably not going full on crazy stack the back on these scrub drivers. So I'm using a little bit more salary than normal. But again, pricing is super soft. Most expensive guys, not even $11,000. And if you're looking at the odds over in Vegas, they're expecting it to be like a super speedway, as the odds on favorite to win is Blaney at plus 1,000, when typically at 1.5 mile track, you're going to see a guy like Kyle Larson at plus 375 or plus 400. So the pricing over on DK does kind of reflect on what the odds makers in Vegas are certainly expecting. But anyway, we'll start up top here with Ryan Blaney, $10,700, starting in the second spot. And if you're wondering how qualifying went, because it did get rained out, I believe they used the lineup formula from last season, so it is what it is, but we do have some pretty chalky drivers starting in the back, which will make some pretty high owned lineups, and it's going to be hard to get away from it in cash games, but there's definitely some ways we can go in tournaments to get different. And I do think Ryan Blaney is one of those guys, because the guy right below him, Kyle Larson, is certainly going to be very high owned. You're going to see Denny Hamlin with some ownership starting in 15th. But Ryan Blaney, like I said, no, it's a plate style race, at least that's what we're expecting, going to be a bit of a hybrid mix. But Ryan Blaney is one of the best super speedway drivers, and if we're looking over at the numbers that I am pulling from this week, so I have recent track history, which is not Old Atlanta track history, trust me. If anyone's using Old Atlanta track history this week, just turn off the video because it's not relevant and I don't think they know what they're talking about. So what I'm pulling from here is low wear intermediate tracks, and I'm also using Daytona and Talladega, so it's a bit of a hodgepodge mess of numbers here, but it's at least something to look at. But if we're just looking strictly at super speedways, Blaney, just one of the absolute best drivers at them. If you remove Austin Cendrick's 2-race sample size, Blaney, the past 10 races at Daytona and Talladega, currently sporting the best average finish, one of the best running positions, has the most wins, 5 top 5s, 7 top 10s, third most laps led, and obviously fast laps are not something we can project at these types of tracks. And plus, Blaney has been pretty good here. He was in the optimal lineup at Daytona, starting inside the top 10 earlier this season. And if we do see a bit of a choo-choo train, especially at the beginning, Blaney is starting beside his teammate Joey Logano. You also have Chase Briscoe in a fourth, so if they happen to work together, would not be surprised if Ryan Blaney is the guy that's taking off laps led at the beginning, which would make him interesting in a tournament perspective, although I would not go there in cash games. Kyle Larson, $10,500, starting 21st, tied with Ryan Blaney for the best odds to win this race in Vegas. If you want to pull numbers from the recent track history of the races that I am pulling from, he does have the most DraftKings points per race, the best driver rating, the most wins, and 6 top 5s. Now again, he's just been absolutely dominant at intermediate tracks since last season, so it's no surprise that he would be at the tops of the charts here in pretty much every single category. I know he's not the best super speedway racer, but it's hard not to like Larson starting in 21st because this is an intermediate track still, and if I'm going to expect it to be a bit of a hybrid, Larson's definitely going to be a contender to win this race. I know these numbers of super speedways are not impressive. The past 7 races, we're talking negative 2.3 DraftKings points per race with an average finish nearly in 30th of the running position. Not too much better in 22nd with a pretty poor driver rating. But I can still get behind some Larson here. I'd expect some pretty high ownership. But again, if this was just a regular Daytona Talladega, I wouldn't be in love with Larson. I think he'd be a good fade candidate. But since this is going to be a bit of a hybrid, starting in 21st, he definitely makes for a pretty solid play, and I think you could certainly go there in cash games. And I'm not going to really talk about practice because I don't really think it matters too much. He did put up a P4 in the 10 lap, but again, with everyone drafting off each other, I just hate to put anything into it because, I mean, you could make that assumption just based off of Cody Ware being, I believe he was 7th in the 1 lap in practice, or no, he was 10th, which Cody Ware is not typically the 10th fastest car. So I think that tells you anything. Practice really isn't super important, but I do have the numbers on there if you are interested. Chase Elliott, 10,300. He's starting in 6th. I'm basically viewing him as a very similar play to Ryan Blaney. He's a strong plate racer. We know he's great at intermediates. He's had a fast car so far this season. Arguably had the best car last weekend. Ended up having an issue at the end, still drove up at the last restart. But I really can't say much else beside him being a solid tournament play as a very close play to Ryan Blaney, starting a little bit further back, which does make him a little bit safer. Denny Hamlin, $10,100. He's starting in 15, so viewing him as kind of a similar play to Kyle Larson, just not starting as far back, but we know he's a strong play racer, much better than Kyle Larson is. It's just how much do you want to factor in super speedway versus intermediate, because if it's intermediate, I'm obviously giving the edge to Kyle Larson, but if it's a super speedway, more so like a plate race, I would definitely give the edge to Denny Hamlin there. If you're looking at his past 10 races at plate races, absolutely killing it, the most DraftKings points per race, besides, again, Austin Cendrick having that very small sample size of 2 races, 10.7 average finish, 6 top 5s, 2 wins, the most laps led per race, starting in 15th, certainly a very strong play, even though Joe Gibbs has not been great so far this year. Joey Logano at $9,900, he's starting in 3rd, and he seriously is the same exact play as Ryan Blaney, just starting 1 spot further back, but I would be very surprised if Blaney and Joey Logano are not working together at the very front early on, especially in stage 1. I think one of those two probably ticks off the most laps led in stage 1. So whoever does that will get a nice added floor as far as dominator points go. But again, fast laps should be random in this race. I'm not sure exactly how much it's going to mean in the end, but we have 325 laps. So they will add up more than a regular Daytona race where we're looking at like 160 to 200 laps. But you got to love Joey if it's going to be a super speedway type race. I know his average finish isn't that great at 20.6, but one of the best average rating positions in the entire field, one of the best driver ratings. The finishes have not been there for him recently, but he's typically always up front, always a lap leading contender, and always a contender to win the race. He just needs to stay clean at the end. The problem is it seems like Brad Keselowski finds his way into Joey at some point each and every single super speedway race, or Logano finds trouble himself. But definitely like him as a tournament pivot off of Blaney, as I think Blaney will definitely have more ownership, especially after what he did last weekend. And with Logano being right beside Hamlin, that could certainly drop it a little bit as well. But I do like him quite a bit as far as the tournament plays go. That could be a potential dominator and race winner. Kyle Busch, $9,800. He's starting in 4th. Kind of in a weird spot here because I'd prefer the Fords up front because I think they're just going to carry more speed and they can certainly work together. And as far as Kyle Busch having any Toyotas at the beginning, so you have Tyler Reddick starting 5th. You have Ross Chastain in 7th. Briscoe in 1st. Blaney, like he's going to be kind of all by himself because there's no other Toyota to work with, as you know, Denny Hamlin starting in 15th. You have Martin Truex Jr. in the 20s, and the other guys aren't going to be extremely close to the top 10. So Kyle Busch is going to be by himself, so I could see him getting shuffled down a little bit. Not saying he can't hold his own, but I'm not going to be super high on Kyle Busch. For him to be optimal starting 4th, unless he's going to get up front and lead like 50 to 100 laps, he's probably going to have to win this race, and we know he doesn't really have the best record at plate style racing. I mean, 8.7 DraftKings points per race the past 10, average finish of 24.5. He has a very good running position, but he just seems to have some real bad luck at finishing these races. Although, like I said, if we're going to look at an intermediate track, he did dominate Las Vegas in a parts car from Hamlin starting in the very back. So anything is possible here, but Kyle Busch is purely a low-owned tournament play, and I will not have too much of him, but I don't think he's a full fade. Kevin Harvick, $9,600. Actually, Stuart Haas has not looked too bad this season. Chase Briscoe has a win. Kevin Harvick was fast last week. Eric Amarilla has the best average finish of all drivers so far to start this season. Cole Custer is Cole Custer, but they've kind of had a little bit of a resurgence so far this season, looking at recent track history. Not at Atlanta. With the sample size of tracks that I am using, the numbers don't look too bad for Kevin Harvick. Just really hasn't been a dominator recently. Had a fast car last weekend, but was not able to get up front despite having a very strong car. Record at super speedways, I wouldn't say it's bad. 3 top 5s, 5 top 10s the past 10 races, average finish of 13.4. Starting in 8th, I do think he's worth a shot in tournaments. Wouldn't go there in cash games, but I do think he's a viable play. And then we have William Byron here, $9,400. He is starting in 12th. I'd love to say some things that make Byron such a different play than the guys we already talked about, but really the only thing separating any of these top tier drivers is basically the starting position. And starting in 12th, that means he gets more PD upside than guys like Harvick, Busch, Logano, but not as much as Hamlin, Larson. So I would say he's about close to the same play as Hamlin, Larson, but not nearly as good because of where he's starting a little bit further up. But I have no problems with Byron. We know he's fast at intermediates. Super speedways, a little bit of a different story. Tends to get caught up in the wrecks a lot. Average finish of 22.9, but does have some pretty solid finishes here when he's not wrecking. The problem is he's kind of like 50-50 for wrecking, but he does have a win. 3 top 5s, 3 top 10s, so I certainly think he could be a factor. Could certainly get up front as well. He's averaging 7.4 laps on the past 10 plate races. If he can work with the Chevys, I mean, there's certainly a decent amount of Chevys up front. We have Chase Elliott up there, so we'll see what happens, but I think Byron is a decent tournament play. That's really the only thing I can say about him. Martin Truex Jr., $9,200. He's starting in 26. We know he has a terrible track record at these types of tracks, but starting back in 26, it's definitely hard to ignore him, especially at only $9,200. So while it does make for interesting fade because he will have some high ownership, he is purely a good place differential play at a track that looks like place differential is going to be pretty important. And if you're viewing this as an intermediate, he's typically a top 10 guy with top 5 upside at those as well. Tyler Reddick, $9,000. He is starting 5th. I have loved playing Reddick so far this season. I think he's fantastic for this car and the 670 horsepower package. But since we are at like a Daytona style race, starting in 5th makes him a very risky play. And unless he gets up front and leads a ton of laps and finishes within the top 5 or top 6, I can't see him being optimal outside of that. So probably has very, very little of Tyler Reddick this weekend, unfortunately. But every other week, I'll be more than happy to play Reddick, but not so much this weekend. Alex Bowman, $8,800. He is starting at 11th. And I really can't say anything that I didn't say about Byron here. He's pretty much the same exact place. Everything I said can be applied here. But if you're looking at his numbers, super speedways, it's not pretty. I mean, he's always on the front row, so he's always an auto fade for me. So I hardly ever play him. I'm not sure if I've ever played Bowman. But averaging 3.8 DraftKings points per race the past 10 super speedways with 0 top 5s and 3 top 10s. Like, he's capable of getting a good finish. I think I played him more so at Talladega rather than Daytona, but Bowman, I mean, I'd definitely compare this track more so to Daytona than I would Talladega. So I don't really see myself having too much of Bowman, but probably going to be similar in exposure to Byron, which it's probably not going to be all that much anyway. Brad Keselowski, $8,600, starting in 24th. He is someone I'd certainly have my eye on. Might be one of my favorite plays in the entire slate. Starting all the way back in 24th, we know he's a great plate racer, was awesome at Daytona. And he came out and said he is going to be aggressive, so look for him to take out about half the field once again, because I feel like at Daytona, he was responsible for almost each and every single wreck. And I know he's no longer in a Penske car, but the Fords were very strong at Daytona. Looking at his numbers at plate races, past 10 races, 10.3 average running position, which is one of the best in the field, one of the best drive ratings, has a win, 2 top 5s, 4 top 10s, good chunk of laps. Slutty was a top dom at Daytona, so I can definitely get behind some Brad Keselowski here. Starting all the way in the back, and this price point is fair, even on both sides if you are playing over on FanDuel. Kurt Busch, $8,400, starting at 9th, kind of a similar play to these, like Ross Chastain, about similar play as that. Similar play to Tyler Reddick. I wouldn't say he's a similar play to Joey Logano, Kyle Busch, those kind of guys, but he's not too far off. It's just there's not much upside for him starting at 9th. He'll be a very low owned play, and the only thing I can say about him is I'd play him maybe in 150 max tournaments and getting to maybe roughly 5-ish% exposure, but I think that kind of translates to me saying I don't really want to play Kurt Busch unless I'm building multiple lineups. Chase Briscoe is an interesting one, $8,200. He is starting in 1st, and apparently he's going to be really good this year. I know he's a talented driver, but it's just been so hard to trust Stewart-Haas, heading into the season because of how bad they were last year, but it seems like that's behind them in this new car. These drivers have been performing pretty well. The problem with playing him is if this is going to be a super speedway kind of race, starting in the pole is usually a no-no, but we have 325 laps, which is certainly a lot different than normal. And if he happens to be the guy that leads the first stage, let's say Chase Briscoe leads like 60 plus laps this weekend, maybe gets close to 100 depending on how the other stages go, Briscoe could be somewhat of a viable play at this price point. Now, again, if fast laps are going to be sporadic, I'm not 100% certain if fast laps are going to be completely random. But if they are sporadic, Chase Briscoe has to lead laps, and he has to be pretty darn near close to winning this race, if not winning this race. But I'm not going to come out here and say full fade Chase Briscoe. I'm just saying be careful. If this was a normal racetrack, like if we were back at Auto Club or something, I could definitely get behind some $8,200 Briscoe from what we've seen so far this year, as he seems to have a fast car. It's just with this style of racing, if they're going to be in packs, and Team Penske could easily beat out Briscoe here. Joey Logano, Ryan Blaney team up, and they can certainly be the guys that tick off the lap sled at the beginning. So just be careful with Briscoe. But unfortunately, I think I'm going to play some, as awful as that sounds, as it goes against my strategy. But it's not going to be much. But I don't want to get completely blanked that Briscoe comes out and leads 100 laps and kills me if he ends up winning the race or coming in the top 5. Definitely not a cash game play, though. I would not play him in cash games. Ross Chastain, $8,000, starting in 7th, kind of a similar play to Kurt Busch. You just have to hope these guys avoid wrecks if there is any, and pretty much slide into the top 5 at these price points. That's really the only thing I can say. I know Ross Chastain's a talented driver. I think he's in the trucks right now as I'm recording this video, and I want to say he's been doing solid, but have to double check that. But Chastain's a fine play. It's just, again, if he can avoid carnage, if we do have carnage, and get into the top 5, slide in there, he's a good low in tournament play. Wouldn't touch him in cash games. Austin Cendrick, starting off our 7K range, $7,800, a lot more expensive over on FanDuel. He's starting kind of mid-pack in 16, so I'm not sure how many people are going to flock to him. But I'm definitely a fan of the Fords and the Penske cars here. And Austin Cendrick won the Daytona 500 as a rookie. He had a very strong car. He was a pusher for the majority of the race. I'd say he definitely deserved it. I mean, he was fantastic all Daytona 500 long. He's got some pretty decent odds to win this race compared to what he's priced at over on DraftKings. It's a very small sample size here, so I hate to look into it too much, but obviously these numbers are going to be dark shades of green. But you can never really bet against a Penske car or a Ford at these style of races. So I think Cendrick should certainly be on our radars. Christopher Bell, $7,700. I would look to him being a pretty solid cash play, starting nearly all the way back in 30th, 27th starting position. Never really a fan of using him at these style of tracks, but again, this is purely just PD, and he's in a Joe Gibbs car, and if he avoids wrecks, there's no reason why he can't be a top 15 guy. So I think Bell's certainly going to be a solid play, and I would expect some pretty high ownership on him as well. Eric Amarilla, $7,600. He currently has the best average finish of anybody in the Cup Series right now at 7.3, and he's also been in the most optimal lineups this season, 3 out of the 4 races that we've had. Pretty much a similar play. I hate to keep saying it, but there's really not much separating him from guys like Ross Chastain or Kurt Busch, so I'd say I'd have similar exposure, although he's a little bit cheaper, so maybe you go a little bit more on Eric Amarilla with more PD upside, plus he's pretty good at plate races, but I mean, there's nothing that makes me too happy about playing Amarilla starting inside the top 10. Austin Dillon, Bubba Wallace, both similar guys, both have upside at plate races. Bubba, though, he's actually pretty darn good at the super speedways. He was very good here at Daytona. Starting in 19th, there is some PD upside mixed in there. And if you're looking at Bubba's overall numbers, past 10 races at super speedways, 12.4 average finish for a 2.6 DraftKings points per race. Also has 4 top 5s. That's nearly 50% of the time in past 10 races. He's been inside the top 5. So I can definitely get behind some Bubba in tournaments. Hopefully that ownership is not super high. I prefer him a little bit more than Dillon, but again, if you're playing the ownership game, Austin Dillon should have lower ownership, and he certainly has upside at these types of tracks, and he's good at intermediates as well. But where the chalk is more than likely going to be, once again, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., $7,100, starting all the way back in 28th. He was chalk last weekend. Didn't work out starting in the very back, but this is one of those weeks where you definitely want drivers in the back more than likely. And Stenhouse, very aggressive super speedway type racer. He has top 15 upside at intermediates. No reason not to like Stenhouse here, starting in 28th. He could easily be a top 10 guy, a race-winning contender, so I can definitely get behind Stenhouse in cash games or tournaments this weekend. Eric Jones, $6,900, starting in 23rd. I'm kind of viewing him as a somewhat similar play to Stenhouse, as he is a pretty good plate racer. He has that PD upside starting in the 20s. I can definitely get behind some Jones, although I'm not saying much about these drivers, but if it's going to be like a super speedway, there's not much I can say besides where these guys are starting. The further back they start, the more appealing they will be, especially in projections. They just don't have as much dominant potential early on, but again, that could easily get shuffled out as the race goes on. Daniel Suarez, Chris Buescher, both very similar plays here, although as far as starting positions go. But Chris Buescher's a lot better at super speedways than Daniel Suarez is. If you're looking at their track record, the past 10 races at these, you're going to see a pretty stark difference. Go all the way over here. So Daniel Suarez, the past 10 races at super speedways, average finish of 26.7, average DraftKings points of 15.6. Buescher, meanwhile, knocking on the door of a top 10 average finish the past 10 races at 13.6. Running position right there with him, 35.8 DraftKings points per race. If I had to choose between the two, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with Buescher. If this was an intermediate track, I'd be pretty close in the two, but I will give the edge to Buescher here. Michael Mcdowell, great at Daytona, and if this is going to race like Daytona, even in the slightest, you'd have to like Michael Mcdowell starting all the way back in nearly 30th. Looking at the past 10 races at plate races for him, average finish at 15.5. 36.6 DraftKings points per race. So I will definitely get behind McDowell. You can certainly play him in cash games. Harrison Burt at $6,400, kind of in a similar boat there, where he's starting to the very back, kind of in a Penske car with the Wood brothers. If he's able to team up with Cendrick, Blaney, and Joey Logano, that'd be fantastic. $6,400 starting that far back is certainly going to be playable to me. Cole Custer, Justin Haley, Ty Dillon, kind of all in the same umbrella here as being very similar plays. I would spread my exposure out somewhat evenly, but I would want to be heavier on Justin Haley and Ty Dillon, as both these guys are pretty darn good at super speedways. Past 6 races for them, that's the sample size we're using at super speedways. 42 and 44 DraftKings points per race with an average finish right around 15th place. Starting in 22nd and 18th, both guys make for some pretty interesting tournament plays. I don't think they're going to have extremely high ownership because it's not like they're starting in the very back in the 30s, and guys right above them, Harrison Burt and Michael McDowell, do offer more safety. So I think in tournaments, hopefully these guys go a little bit lower owned. Have not yet ran ownership projections or anything. I'm just doing this right after practice ended, so all these thoughts are fresh in my mind right now. I haven't had a long time to kind of really break down the entire slate, so we're just going through this together. But I could see that Ty Dillon, Justin Haley, Cole Custer range being a pretty decent spot to go in tournaments. Now Gregson, $5,800, Justin Haley's teammate for this race and colleague in the 16 car. I think you can certainly play him starting in 30th. He can be an aggressive driver, but I think he'll be just fine. Starting in 30th, I would be very surprised if he does not gain spots here. Todd Gillan, $5,600, part of the front row, which Michael McDowell, very good at these types of tracks, and I think Todd Gillan can certainly have top 20 upside. Thing is, starting in 25th, he's not going to be as safe as a play as guys like David Reagan, Gregson, and some of the other guys priced around him that offer you more PD, like Corey LaJoie, even Greg Biffle in the very back, so I don't think he's going to have much ownership, but it certainly makes him a decent tournament play. David Reagan, $5,400. He is starting all the way back in 35th, and that's going to make him a very, very viable DFS play, as he is someone I do trust at these track types, and he was in the optimal lineup at Daytona in a similar spot earlier in the season, so I like him purely for PD upside. Corey LaJoie, $5,300. He was slicing and dicing in practice a little bit, showed some speed, starting in 33rd. Kind of a similar play to Reagan, although I think he's a little bit more upside as far as finishing position goes. We know his history at Daytona, typically a guy that would ride around in the back and just grab a good finish. Now, again, I'm not comparing this to Daytona. I'm not sure if there's going to be a massive big one like we always see at Daytona, but if there is wrecks, and even if there is no wrecks, I think Corey LaJoie can certainly gain upon starting 33rd at $5,300. He does allow you to get some studs in if you are looking to go stars and scrubs on this slate. Biffle's in the very back. If you are expecting wrecks, he can't lose you any spots, so I would recommend him if you're looking for safety. But again, if there's not massive wrecks, maybe he finishes 28th, 27th, which again, it's not even a bad day starting at 37 just to get some studs up top. So I'm not saying I don't like Biffle. I just don't think he's a super exciting play, but he is very safe. Josh Bilicki, $5,000 starting in 36. If it's mass carnage, he'll be a good play. If not, probably not a great play. So it's just depending on which way you think this track is going to play out. BJ McLeod was very slow in practice. He could potentially be in danger of going laps down. Cody Ware, 10th in the one lap in practice. Maybe he'll show some speed. The problem is he's starting 32nd, so he's kind of not in the very back, which doesn't make him appealing. But he is a low-owned tournament play if you happen to think there's going to be mass carnage and he finishes inside the top 20. But outside of that, I can't see him being a very great play, but I will have a little bit of sprinkle on Cody Ware. I think I'd rather play him over BJ McLeod. But with that being said, I think that'll be it for the video. So if you found this helpful, entertaining, informational in any way possible, just leave a like on the video and subscribing if you haven't already. It does go a long way, and I do appreciate it. If you want to check out the extra content over on Patreon, you know where to find it. Link can be found down below. Spreadsheets, optimizers, ownership projections, Discord community, all that fun stuff. Link can be found in the description. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by PrizePicks. Just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, optimizers, or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you sign over there, you can get a free instant deposit match bonus up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. But I think that'll be it. I'll get out of here. I wish you all the best of luck for a potentially very crazy Atlanta race. And for those of you viewing the live stream tomorrow, I will see you on Sunday.